It is Thursday, August 6, 2026, coming to you from America's beautiful North Coast, from the shores of Lake Superior. This is The American Dissent. I'm your host, Sam Martin.
And I'm Jen Schultz.
Before we dive in, please subscribe to our channel. Hit the like button, leave a comment. It all helps as we begin our journey here on YouTube. If you're listening to the podcast, please leave a 5-star review. Thank you ever so much. On today's show, Donald Trump apparently is unhappy with Secretary of Defense or Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth. We're behind closed doors as the near complete depletion of long-range missiles and interceptors has become major public discourse. Trump apparently has scolded the secretary. This news comes in light of Trump's canceled plans to launch, quote, the biggest attack since World War II, unquote, on Iran. Iran, meanwhile, continues to work with Oman on their plans to oversee the Strait of Hormuz without any U.S. input. That plan is, according to Iranian officials, near finalization. In public, Trump has launched an horrifically racist attack on newly minted Democratic Senate nominee Abdul El-Sayed. And he's lashing out at one of his closest allies, Jeanine Pirro, his own chosen U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia. You see, she decided to drop all charges against the people arrested for vandalizing the reflecting pool, that group that included Olympic canoeist David Hearn. Pirro concluded that the damage was actually the result of the botched installation, an installation done by a contractor friend of the president who was selected in a no-bid process. Slowdowns at U.S. Customs and Immigration Services have allowed a backlog of cases to surge to 7.5 million people during Trump's term so far. Those cases are related to citizenship, green cards, and work permit applications. If we also include asylum and humanitarian cases, that number rises to 12.1 million in the backlog. Lastly, there are primaries today in Tennessee. Many eyes are watching the redrawn 9th Congressional District, where State Representative Justin Pearson is running a DSA-style campaign against a more traditional Democrat in State Senator London Lamar. Pearson gained national fame as one of the Tennessee Three lawmakers whose protests over the failure to pass any gun control measures resulted in their expulsion, though they were later reinstated. Pearson has the support of Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, among others. Saturday, Hawaiians go to the polls. In the 1st Congressional District, which is primarily made up of Honolulu, Democratic voters have an opportunity to register their discontent with incumbent Congressman Ed Case, who has voted with Trump on the Save America Act, which opponents fear will lead to fewer people voting, and he has championed Israel's behavior in Congress. His opponent is Jarrett Keohokalole, a member of the Democratic leadership in the state Senate. He is notable for shepherding through a bill to attempt to curtail the effects of Citizens United in Hawaii over campaign finance. And of course, next Tuesday is primary day in Minnesota and Wisconsin, as well as Connecticut, South Carolina, and Vermont. Much more on those next week. These headlines and more up for discussion on today's Dissent. Oh, and also, before I turn it to Jen, we have an interview that we recorded earlier with Duke Skorich and Patty McNulty, who are pollsters and research analysts. It's a fantastic interview. Stick around to watch that. So, Jen,
the first question we asked them is, how did the polls get it so wrong in Michigan? So I think people might want to hear what their take is and their predictions of accuracy of future polling in political races. But yeah,
speaking of Michigan, I have to make a correction.
Okay.
I screwed up. We were talking about Kent County and Grand Rapids, and I mistakenly said that Haley Stevens did well in Kent County. How wrong I was. Kent County was actually El-Sayed's best county in the state of Michigan. Geographically, I was picturing the wrong county. I was actually picturing Muskegon, which is just to the west of
Mm.
Kent, which was Haley Stevens County. But yeah, it was his best county. It even did better for him than Washtenaw, which is where Ann Arbor and the University of Michigan is. So apologies to the
Can't
very
believe you
hard
made a
work of his.
mistake, Sam, and I didn't catch it right away. Wow.
Wow. Well, but you were yeah, you had it right though. So, but I feel bad about that because there are a lot of really good people working hard in Kent County to make that happen for
It's okay.
Abdul.
You're a human. They'll know you're not AI, Sam. You make
Yeah,
mistakes.
I used to when I went to college in Connecticut for several years, and I used to drive back and forth a couple of times, and I would take the ferry across Lake Michigan from Manitowoc, Wisconsin to Ludington, Michigan. And I would, there's the interstate that goes down the west side of Michigan, and I had a friend who lived in Grand Rapids, and so I would get off and have, go out to lunch or something. And I pictured Grand Rapids much closer to the coast, and those few counties along the coast were Haley Stevens County. So that's what I was picturing. So, oops.
My son and his friends just did a little road trip to Sleeping Bear Dunes, and they were in Traverse City. They were along the western part, and then I think they went to Mackinac Island. He's not giving me any updates, so I don't know. I can just track him on his phone. So hopefully I'll get the update when he returns on Friday.
By the way, a little bit of kind of goofy curiosity that I had. There's this tiny county in Michigan called, I think it's Keweenaw. I'm not too sure on pronunciation, but that's the little county on the tip of the Upper Peninsula that also includes Isle Royale. And I was talking to a friend of mine who was pointing that out, and I'm like, yeah, nobody lives on Isle Royale, but that's a place I'd like to visit someday.
Just the wolves live on. People love to go camping there.
Yeah. For those who don't know, that's if you picture Lake Superior looking like a wolf's head, Isle Royale is the eye. It's a huge island.
It's closer to Minnesota, but it's in Michigan. It's Michigan territory.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, I think on a really clear day, if you're at the very tip of Minnesota on the lake, you can see Isle Royale from there. Although it's quite a ways into Lake Superior, it's tens of miles, but you can see it on a clear day. Pretty cool. Anyways, let's get out of the Midwest for a moment, shall we? or shall we not? But where do you want to start? Because obviously we need to touch on the fact that, Trump is lashing out at people. He's obviously very upset. Things are not going well.
So the New York Times just put out a story evaluating the number of women who are not getting promoted in by the Secretary of Defense. So
and this is an old story.
Is that an old story? Well, we knew that he wasn't promoting women and people of color, but the share of high-ranking officer nominations going to women, like in 2022 and beyond, it's more than 10%, and now it's only 4%.
So that Pete Hegseth bro culture is now is reaching down into the ranks is what.
Yeah, the women and people of color are not getting nominated for high-ranking positions. They're being eliminated.
Well, it's possible that Trump is going to start lashing out at Hegseth more often now. Is clearly he thought that this would be a cakewalk, this whole Iran thing. Why he thought that is anyone's, I'm sure that's what Netanyahu told him. I'm sure that's what Pete Hegseth told him. But now that turned out not to be the case and they're out of long-range missiles, now Trump sent out a tweet saying, oh, we got plenty of other things, but those other things have to be flown over, which means putting U.S. service members once again in the firing line. And there's already been enough deaths. In fact, remember that story from a couple of weeks ago where, there were those four service deaths, 3 on the Iranian base and then 1 in Iraq during a bomb diffusion. And they said, no, those deaths don't count as part of this war because they happened after the MOU. So he's very sensitive to U.S. service member deaths, and I'm sure does not want to do flyovers. And they've pulled back a lot of,
Well,
those
he said
bases
that the compromise is close. That
he always says that.
I think he has said it like 40 times. I think
Yeah.
some media or independent journalists have tracked the number of times he said that. We have a deal. We have a deal. We have a compromise. Blah 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 blah.
Well, he said it yesterday.
He obviously wants to get out of this war. He just doesn't know how.
Well, I mean, there's an easy way, but he would have to admit the U.S. was defeated.
And that Iran will control the Strait of Hormuz.
Which
looks like that's going to be what happens to get out of this.
Yeah, they're not even thinking
war.
about the United States as they do this consultation with Oman. And Oman, doesn't want to piss off the U.S., but Oman also, wants to move forward with, Oman, of the Gulf countries, Oman appears to have the best relationship with Iran, like a very good relationship with Iran. And Iran wants to drive a wedge between the Gulf countries and the United States. And if they can get Oman on board, and Oman can start convincing some of the other Gulf states to just, guys, just go with this, then that creates an even bigger headache for the U.S. war hawks, who are extremely unhappy every time Trump says anything about ending this war. They just go berserk. That's why Trump bounces back and forth, because he'll listen to the J.D. Vance types that want to end it, and then he'll listen to the Mark Levin types that want to just keep it going. It's like the last person
he hears from. That's where his position is when he's right in front of the press, right? Oh, who did I just talk to? I mean, this is no way of doing foreign policy, especially in dealing with the war. Exactly. So, yeah, it's concerning, because now Ukraine is the one that's really being harmed, because we don't have enough anti-ballistic missiles to give to them to shoot down Russia. And maybe, this is Russia's strategy, prolong it. Let the U.S. exhaust their military weapons, their anti-ballistic missiles, etc., and then they're vulnerable.
I heard a story. I think it was confirmed, though don't hold me to it, but apparently Russia got an influx of long-range ballistic missiles from North Korea that they're now using. They're hitting Kyiv in Ukraine. And Ukraine's begging for interceptors, but we're out. We're just out. We blew them all defending Israel a year ago, in Midnight Hammer, Operation Midnight Hammer. God, these names. These are all Pete Hegseth names, by the way.
So clever. I'm sure he spends an excessive amount of time coming up with these clever names for his
Epic
missions.
Fury was kind of a failure, because a lot of critics were calling it Epstein's Fury, which, fair enough. That's a good name for it with this administration. But outside of the international context, I have a really big fear about how badly things are going with relation to domestic affairs, because as things go worse and worse for Trump over things abroad that he has absolutely no control over and cannot get control over them, he can turn his sights to things he does have a lot more control over, which is being a fascist in the United States of America. And that's got me very concerned, because he just gave a speech in Las Vegas about, presumably the speech was supposed to be about his economic policy. But as with everything Trump, he just wheels off into talking about whatever the hell pops into his mind at that moment. And one of the things was Abdul El-Sayed. Republicans are freaking out about Abdul El-Sayed in a way they wouldn't with Haley Stevens. That should tell us something about what Republicans think about Abdul El-Sayed winning. And what's interesting is what Fox News says about Abdul El-Sayed. It mirrors almost exactly what CNN talking heads have been saying. He's going to need a pivot to be more moderate. He's going to need to be conciliatory to us, racist assholes. I mean, that is, CNN's basically been saying that.
Are they practicing for the Ellison takeover?
Yeah. I mean, but MSNBC, or MS Now, I guess it's called, they do the same crap. I mean, the corporate media just is like, they're in lockstep. I think that should send a signal to everyone. If the corporate Democrats in the establishment are using the exact same argument that Fox News uses. What should that tell us?
Yeah, and maybe Republicans are worried because money didn't win. And that's what they have, right? Their ability to organize is not that great.
Well, I think they recognize in Abdul El-Sayed and the other DSA people the same movement that swept them into power with the Tea Party and the Freedom Caucus and all that kind of stuff. It was extremely successful for them, and now they're seeing that same energy, but on the Democratic side, and they are freaking out about it. And add to that the fact that they're racist. I mean, we did talk about that ridiculous race in Michigan where the Trump back guy with the Arab name
believe that is implicit racism bias. So other people are saying the same thing about the Smith guy that won that wasn't even in the race. He was not even like a legit candidate. And he got 50% of the vote.
Oh, there's no doubt. I mean, that's pure racism. In fact, there's this video. I didn't clip it because it just popped into my head. It was from a week, 2 weeks ago. Vivek Ramaswamy, who's the GOP candidate for governor in Ohio, who is of Indian extraction. So he's brown-skinned and part of the GOP. He went and spoke to a young conservatives forum or something. And he was supposed to speak for 30 minutes, but he was booed vociferously as he walked on stage, and he was heckled and booed throughout his speech because he has brown skin. I mean, that's it. And the crowd told him that.
Wow.
And this is his base. And it was in the town he was born and raised in Ohio.
And this
Cincinnati.
is just going to put more pressure. I mean, Trump is going to put more pressure, and I think J.D. Vance is already doing that with Republicans to pass their SAVE Act to take away people's right to vote. That's what is going to happen because they're going to see this groundswell of movement, organizing energy around with the Democrats, progressive Democrats, and young people, and they're going to we got to make sure these folks aren't voting. And so J.D. Vance was on the Hill today talking to Republicans at their luncheon, pushing them to pass the SAVE Act, the Senate Republicans.
Yeah. No, it's concerning. And just to go back to what I didn't finish my thought from earlier, my concern about how Trump is what he's going to do, because he has lost control over international affairs and focus on what he does have control over here. I mean, there was a reason he's furious with Jeanine Pirro and so there was a press conference, and I am going to show a clip from it where he's asked about Jeanine Pirro, and he goes on to talk about the reflecting pool. Jen, I kid you not, for 8 minutes, pretty much nonstop. 8 minutes.
Let's get the facts out there. So the New York Times also has a article out, right, and just posted today, and they did a visual inspection from video and photographs of the reflecting pool as it's being repaired. Mm-hmm. And you can see all of the peeling lining that they put down, just peeling before they paint it early on. There's 12 spots where it's defective and was never repaired. So, so this is what Jeanine Pirro, basically when she was called to the White House, she brought a ton of documents. And in that meeting, which we don't really have a lot of intel on what happened, but Susie Wiles, Trump's chief of staff, is there, I'm sure probably in support of Jeanine Pirro, but who knows. And Doug Burgum, who's the Secretary of the Interior, who basically Jeanine Pirro said he lied. He didn't give us the right information, said all these things. We checked the evidence. There's nothing there to support what he's saying. And I went to the press and told him the truth. And that's what Trump is mad about, that she did not support Doug Burgum's lies. Yeah,
because this is something that he feels he has control over. His triumphal arch, the reflecting pool, the tearing down the East Wing to build his ballroom, all that stuff. It says he's going to focus more and more and more on those things and on suppressing people when he can. I mean, he wants those people he thinks are vandals, he wants them to burn. I mean,
what I'm worried about, that's a concern. A bigger concern is they're funding these intelligence agencies and folks to scrape the social media, the internet, for any comment that could be disparaging or negative towards a federal agency or a public servant. So they are going after individual people that may have posted their frustration with the FBI or with Kash Patel. And they're giving them
certain public
subpoenas.
servants, right? Because they're not going after people who've said horrible things about, say, Anthony Fauci.
Or Biden, right? And so this is terrifying that they are going after citizens, and we will not have freedom of speech in this country if they succeed. It's
a theory. I mean, it's basically a fact, but this goes back a long time. It's called the imperial boomerang. The horrors you visit as an imperial power, which we are, it's an American empire. We have, hundreds of bases all around the world. The horrors that we visit upon the people we oversee abroad will eventually come back to hurt the very people who live in the country. And Trump is the apotheosis of that imperial boomerang. He wants to do those things. And if you listen to his avatar, Stephen Miller, he was on Sean Hannity last night just saying, again, talking about Abdul El-Sayed. I mean, they are obsessed with Abdul El-Sayed. And they're attributing comments made by anybody with brown skin that they don't like. They're just saying that Abdul El-Sayed himself said them. I mean, they're just, it's just nonstop, constant racist dog whistles. But you know what the crazy thing is? They always bring up Israel. I think they're completely misreading the politics of this. They're saying, oh, he's anti-Israel. Oh, Israel. When they attack Abdul, they're always talking about Israel. And if that's the best they've got, well, in the Democratic Party, Israel is a 90-10 issue. Mm-hmm. As in, Israel has basically 10% support. And in the broader electorate, it's way, way, way worse than 50-50 from the standpoint of Trump and Stephen Miller. I mean, it's like they don't have the public on their side on this one. But that's the only argument they got. What are they going to do? Say Medicare for all is the devil? Well, that is their other argument, because they're talking about, oh, it's communist. He wants Medicare for all. He's a communist. And
that's also not going to be effective. People are so frustrated that they can't afford their health care, along with everything else they can't afford. But health care, I mean, come on. Most people think they deserve and have a right to health care. You can't go without health care. I mean, it's just really, really sad that our country is so far behind most other countries in terms of getting people access to health care without bankrupting them. So, no, they are going to attack. They are going to use fear, and they're going to use negative ads and denigrate people like they've done in the past. And it's just going to get worse.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. It's going to be. I feel very, very sorry for just regular people trying to go about their lives and, watch a streaming show or two in the evening in Michigan. They're going to just be inundated with the darkest, most nasty racist ads. Mike Rogers has basically already signaled how he's going to run in this race, and it's all
he's nothing
racist.
Special. He's got awful. No charisma. He was like in intelligence or something. He's
FBI,
super blah. He is not going to motivate Republicans to go vote, I don't think. I mean, they're not going to go out of their way to go support this person.
I can't imagine it.
So I think Abdul El-Sayed has a good chance to win. I mean, it'll be really hard. He's going to have to work really hard, and his team will, and all the volunteers that work for him. But I think they're motivated to do that.
Yeah. And Jen, we may have to both correct ourselves from something we were talking about last time, which was the amount of Republicans who may have voted in the Democratic primary for Haley Stevens, because number crunchers in Michigan are now suggesting that the turnout for Democrats increase and the decrease in turnout for Republicans in the primary kind of violates all expectations. It just doesn't make sense numbers-wise. So they think there are a number of Republicans who, out of fear of Islam, this Islamophobia, may have gotten Democratic ballots and voted for Haley Stevens. So it's possible that her overperformance, based compared to the polls, is partially a result of that. Like, it may have made an impact, not in the overall outcome, but in the appearance.
Maybe in districts where they didn't have a competitive race, a primary.
Well, the
for
Senate wasn't
Republicans.
competitive, and maybe
No,
plenty of
but I mean, they
Republicans
had
didn't know
congressional
about.
races that were. Did they have some competitive? And maybe they didn't care about that as much as
There
their
weren't many,
U.S. senator.
actually. There weren't many competitive
Too bad. I
House
was hoping it was
races.
just more Democrats. People became Democrats. And
Well, it
voted
was
Democrat. I don't know.
more. I'm sure it was more. That there were more Democratic voters is undeniable, but they think the data crunchers think that there's an not unconsiderable number of Republicans that may, out of Islamophobia and fear, have voted for Haley Stevens, which
But even though she was being predicted to be a better, candidate in the general than Abdul El-Sayed.
I think
don't
Republicans don't believe that as much as Democrats do.
Okay.
First of all. And second of all, I think Islamophobia wins out over any kind of strategic consideration a voter might have.
I don't think
Because
we should get in there. I don't think we should make predictions like that. Whatever. Abdul El-Sayed.
That's not a prediction. It's
I'm just saying,
an assumption of what something already happened.
A story that it'll be very hard to verify. Right?
It would be very hard to verify. So you just have to kind of go on what these data analysts suggest. It's just the numbers aren't right, and that's the only explanation they can come up with. Is that some statistically significant would be the technical
Yeah, but did
language.
they see an increase in the number of Democrats who actually registered to vote for the first time? We should look for that data to see if the increase.
But then in our interview that we recorded earlier that we're going to show here afterwards, Patty McNulty says, and I think she's right, that a number of people who may have a number of young people who would tell posters, yes, I'm voting for Abdul El-Sayed. They see these polls where he's way ahead. And, for a first-time voter or for someone who thinks of voting as a chore and kind of an inconvenience, they might be, oh, he doesn't need my vote. I'll sit this, I don't need to go out of my way to do it. And I think that may have played a role as well. But that was something Patty McNulty suggested in our interview, which please do stick around and watch that after we're done. But I do want to, in the light of this, talking about Islamophobia and this kind of, the Republicans seem to think that the dual narrative of using the word communist and talking about Israel, which I don't know why they do it, but that seems to be their strategy with Abdul El-Sayed. Now, I'm going to show a clip of Trump at that speech he gave in Las Vegas, which was supposed to be about how great his economic policy is, and you'll see behind him is the no tax on tips logo. Okay. but yeah, I mean, before the clip begins, he brings up the fear of communism, but this is more his direct attack, on Abdul El-Sayed as a Muslim.
And the polls were wrong again last night when they thought it would be a landslide victory for a hater of Jews and a hater of I hate Jews. No, he hates Jews and he hates Israel. Abdul El-Sayed. Can you believe this? This could only happen to me. Abdul El-Sayed, lovely gentleman. He's a man of hate. And now he's going around saying, no, I love everybody. He doesn't love everybody. Put him in office. You're going to find out what he loves. He doesn't love Israel. He doesn't love Jewish people. He hates them. He hates them with a passion that burns in his heart, and there's not a frickin' thing he can do about it. There's not a thing he can do about it because he hates them.
Oh, my God. He's got a teleprompter, so somebody wrote that speech for him. He's looking directly at the leaning on the podium, looking right at the teleprompter. So,
well, who knows how much he's riffing to a certain degree.
Yeah.
But how gross is that?
Yeah, it's awful.
But who cares?
There are a lot of folks who are Jewish who are campaigning for Abdul El-Sayed.
Yes.
So what he says is not true.
Well, of course
not.
Just
a lie.
Yes. And I don't understand, because there's a very significant proportion of the Republican Party that is anti-Israel because they are genuinely anti-Semitic.
Right.
like the Nick Fuentes crowd, they hate Israel because they hate Jews in general, which is, that's not the reason to be anti-Israel. But, I mentioned, God, Jen, I said yesterday that we were going to come back to a clip with Jon Stewart, and then I never went back to it. I apologize for that. We should play it today, but just to point out the silliness of this equating of Jewishness with Israel that shouldn't happen. And John Fetterman was on Jon Stewart's podcast, and in the little teaser trailer clip that Jon Stewart puts out, Jon Stewart calls him out on that. So I do want to get back to that, just because I said I would. Just because I said I would play it last time, and I did not. But yeah, no, that Trump argument, God, it's so gross. Obviously, that's going to work among the 30% of people that still supports him. But
I don't even want to play what he says anymore. I know it's important for people to understand how derailed he is or whatever, but I mean, it's hard to listen to him and anything he says.
I understand. We are going to have one more Trump clip where he brings up Jeanine Pirro. But before that, let's actually go, since we're on this Israel topic, since Trump brought it up, let's take a look at this teaser trailer clip that Jon Stewart did with Fetterman. We can pause as we go, but it's bizarre. Fetterman doesn't appear to even be responding to what's being directly asked of him. It's very strange. And I will be watching the entire thing. I think it's come out now, but this was the teaser trailer for it.
So for you could agree with them 90%, but Israel is the red line.
Absolutely. Israel for me. Like I can't ever turn my back to Israel after where it's at.
So, and I mean no disrespect on this, but that is not our country. You're saying that these candidates may have great ideas for our economy. They may want to do the exact same thing you want to do in terms of getting money out of politics. They may want to increase the social safety net. They may want to change the balance of power from capital back to labor. But if they don't agree with you on Israel, you don't want them in your party.
Well, I don't know who you're referencing to specifically.
No, I'm referencing what you just said.
Name
So
one.
in other words, Syed or AOC or Bernie Sanders, I assume you agree with a lot of what they say economically.
Does he? At this point?
I think he once did.
Yeah.
But maybe it depends on who's saying it. I don't know.
It's very unclear now that that's true. But let's assume it's true. I mean, John's using a good argument here, but I'm not sure it can quite work because nobody knows where Fetterman stands on pretty much any issue anymore. But
And what I'm saying is, like, if you are a DSA member, if you are a member of a specific political party, run under your own banner. And now I think Bill Maher said something very insightful. He said, the DSA are colonizing the Democratic Party.
God.
A lot of people think that, though, Sam.
Well, yeah. And so there's a lot of unhappiness with Democrats within the party. And so people are trying to change the party. To use the word colonization. And frankly, Bill Maher is setting up his own why I became a Republican arc right now. We could play that too, but he had this horrible, horrible screed on his show that even his audience was just not. He had to. He even scolded his audience during it for not laughing enough.
I know a lot of people who stopped watching his show. So.
Oh yeah, no, he's basically a Republican at this point. But anyways, we'll continue.
So just be Democrats if you're going to run under the Democratic Party for that. Why have a DSA party for overall? So run on that, and you all understand.
It's just an organization. It's not, we have a two-party system. It's like the Freedom Caucus in the Republican Party. There are, there's Randy Fine and Ogles and all these nutbags that are also part of an area, and Republicans, I'm sure, may not agree with all of them on all kinds of things, but there is no other party.
Well,
I guess you could try it, but my point is, if you don't disagree with them on a lot of things, why not use some of that energy? And even like Mamdani in New York is DSA, but there are things in the DSA platform that he disagrees with. And I'm assuming there's probably things in the Democratic platform that you might disagree with, but you don't disavow the entire thing. You're literally saying we can all have discussions, except when it comes to Israel.
By the way, does this like almost verbatim that argument that Crystal Ball had with Adam Smith, if you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
That do you agree with everything on the Democratic platform? No, then so John Stewart's doing a good job, as he usually does in these kind of contentious interviews.
Which is not America. It seems like a weird line to draw.
Well, so then, I don't think that's weird. I think what history demonstrates is that when people or a government or people turn their back to the Jewish community, things end really badly, and it's a dangerous.
Jewish community and Israel are not the same thing, brother man. They're not. That is not the same thing.
No. It's like, hey, it's like if I have to pick a side for after 10/7 and after Iran, I'm always going to stand with Israel. I'm always going to vote and support whatever that's necessary to protect themselves and to prosecute Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran too. And the very left never said a peep after Iran executed 30 to 40,000 young people in there just for protesting for democracy.
You think that the left is pro Iran, not the country, but the regime?
What I'm saying though is, like, if anyone in the Democratic Party is fine with Iran building a nuclear bomb, I disagree with that person.
I think most people are. Again, I think you're caricaturing the issue. But is there anything you would criticize Israel about?
Wow.
I do want to know the answer to that question.
Well, I do. That's one podcast I do listen to, and I'm glad it's weekly, so I can keep up. But I haven't listened to the interview yet. But
my goodness,
it's
though,
good.
I mean,
John is really pushing back.
Yeah,
he's a smart man.
And Fetterman can't acknowledge.
I think
his comment.
Fetterman is thinking about what John is saying, and he's trying to process that. So he probably doesn't get a lot of pushback. People are
he's always on
intimidated
Fox
by
News
him
now.
Oh,
no, Fetterman's always on Fox
so
News.
He doesn't get pushback on
softball.
Fox channel.
Never. And he has actually on his staff, on his Senate staff, he has an Israeli handler. This was a famous thing that came out a while ago. But yeah, no, I
think he should have more conversations with Jon Stewart and other folks, and maybe they can convince him otherwise. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, again, you're very kind, Jen.
I'm trying to be optimistic, Sam.
I think he just needs to go away.
Well, I think that he's going to be primaried.
Oh yeah, I mean, I would be surprised if he ran again.
I think he lost a lot of staff. They're very concerned about his health.
Yeah. Well, you can see. You said you can see him processing, but he's not processing well. I mean, the stroke is playing a huge role in his.
Possibly. I'm not going to be a medical doctor, but
massive change. I mean, come on.
Okay.
There's no way that can't be the case. I mean, you don't have to be a medical doctor to know that he's very different than he was. You just look. It's quite obvious.
Let's just wrap up other things that are happening in DC. Apparently, Fauci was found to be in contempt of Congress by Senator Rand Paul's committee. This is the Committee for Homeland Security and Government Affairs. It was like an 8-5 vote, so along party lines. 8 to 7. Okay, so Fauci was pardoned by Biden. So they're saying he's not going to be prosecuted for this contempt. But Senator Rand Paul has a quote that I just want to read. It's very interesting, and I want your take on it. So this is regarding Fauci's taking the Fifth Amendment. He said, quote, "Oversight is not a courtesy this committee extends or a favor a former official grants us. it is a constitutional obligation. Oversight is a constitutional obligation. That is so funny coming from Republicans who are providing no accountability or oversight for what the Trump administration is doing.
Right.
It's their response. He's saying this is the number one thing we have to do. It's in the Constitution, oversight. Well,
And
then
they
do
don't
it.
do it.
For Fauci, this is not what we're worried about right now.
Yeah, nobody cares. But at this point, they're grasping it. Everything, is going bad for Republicans in terms of optics. Like every initiative they do, this war, everything, because everything ties to Trump eventually. Everything the Republican goes to Trump. He is clearly the leader of the party. He's the person everyone's sucking up to. So everything that goes wrong for him goes wrong for all these people as well. And so it's just a sideshow. It's just a distraction.
And then the other thing on Capitol Hill that's going on, and I think I mentioned this in our upcoming interview with Duke and Patty, but the FCC, in charge of the communications oversight, voted yesterday to eliminate the national TV ownership cap. This has been around for decades, it puts a limit on broadcasters' ability to own a total of TV stations that reach more than 39% of U.S. households. And they're claiming that this limit hurts local stations because they find it hard to compete with social media, with streaming services, and etc.
Well, they had to come up with some excuse to do this.
Apparently, Republicans in the Senate aren't excited that the FCC did that. They believe this is in the realm that Congress should decide. So we'll see where this goes.
They're gonna do nothing. If Trump wants it, Trump gets it for these people.
I think so.
They can complain. They can say stuff. I mean, they're all turning into Susan Collins in the Senate. I'm concerned, and then doing nothing about that concern. It's completely ridiculous. But we should move on. We'll skip the Trump complaining about Janine. I'll just quote him. He said, "Frankly, I think she choked because the judge was really vicious. Instead of going after the people that did it, the judge went after her and her department. And I guess she choked." So
that's not what she did. She was pissed, upset, angry at Burgum because she's
really pissed, upset, and angry at Trump. Trump knows the truth too.
He's trying to cover up for all his mistakes he made with this reflecting pool and putting the blame on her. That's what Burgum is doing.
Well, if you were to switch Burgum and Piro's roles, because Doug Burgum, he has no duty to the court. He has no burden of proof. He can say whatever the hell he wants. And if Jeanine Pirro was still on Fox News, she would just parrot his line. But since she actually would have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that these people maliciously vandalized the reflecting pool, she has to act in accordance with the small amount of respect she continues to have for the judicial process, which I don't think amounts to a whole hell of a lot, but at least it's enough to recognize that she doesn't want to make a complete fool of herself over this case. So, way to go, Trump. Now, there's much, much more to come. Next week, we're going to dive into Minnesota and Wisconsin, their primaries. We hope to have guests on next week to talk about the growing movement in the Democratic Party that apparently Bill Maher wants to compare to colonization, which is just also racist and insane because this movement has a lot of people of color in it.
The DSA is what you're referring to.
I'm talking about the DSA. And so we have someone we're working on getting on who knows a lot about the history of the DSA and that movement as a whole. And also we're working on getting our military expert back to talk about this missile shortage and a little more bird's eye view state of play of what's going on militarily.
And then I want to talk about this new GAO report that refutes the Doge savings.
Oh, so we'll talk about that next week as well. Yep. Yep, Doge claims they made all
Yes.
these cuts and saved all this money when in fact they did not, as it
Correct.
turns out. I'm shocked. Elon Musk failed at something? Say it isn't so. But these things and more next week. But for now, please stick around, watch our interview with Duke Skorich and Patty McNulty. It's great. But for now, that is our dissent. On behalf of Jen Schultz, I'm Sam Martin, and this has been our dissent. Joining us now are the power couple of Duke Skorich and Patty McNulty. Duke has been a local news anchor and news director, had a successful independent radio show for just under 2 decades with Patty, and runs Zenith Research Group, which does polling, analysis, and more for government agencies, nonprofits, and business. Patty is a radio maven, buying her first station at 29 years old, eventually owning and running 6 stations. After retiring from radio at 43, Patty's been with Zenith Research Group as well, running focus sessions and doing market research. These are people who know polling, they know analysis, and they know what it takes to be successful in politics and business, not just in northern Minnesota, but in regions all around the country. So we're very excited to have both Duke and Patty on. Thank you so much for joining us.
Very excited to be here. Thank you so much, Sam, and thank you so much, Jet. Good to see you both.
Thank you.
So, I mean, I don't want to immediately dive into politics, but I do immediately want to dive into politics because it was a big day yesterday. And Duke, again, everyone's talking about the polling because going into the election yesterday in Michigan, the pollsters all seem to agree. And I've heard the term herding. Maybe you can break that term down a little bit, but pollsters were showing a very, very big margin of victory for Abdul El-Sayed. Now, he did win, but the margin of victory was in fact 1%. And we probably know why. On the ground, analysts are telling us exactly why that happened, but pollsters missed it. This is not unusual in Michigan. So what happened?
Well, sure. I mean, all night long, El-Sayed was ahead about 22 to 23,000 votes right from the very beginning. And it held that margin almost all night long. So, yeah, we have seen pollsters over sample and to try to keep the margins closer. But in this case, sometimes, Sam, people don't tell you the truth when you ask them on the phones or whether they're online. Sometimes people will lie to you and they'll say they're going to do this and really they do something else or they don't vote at all. When you ask people, do you intend to vote in the primary? And they say yes, you have to believe them. Sometimes they tell you that because they don't want to embarrass themselves by having you believe that they're not going to take part in the democratic process of voting. So any numbers of things could have happened in Michigan. It's happened across the country in recent elections. Reaching people either by phone or online has become increasingly difficult. And I don't know that we have any other way to do this. Some polling firms are more accurate in their sampling than others. But in the last presidential election, we found any numbers of anomalies. So we just do the best that we can, to as many people as we can, and hope that they're truthful in their responses to us.
Or my non-scientific theory, based on, I read a couple of different articles that said a lot of the people they were talking to in Michigan said they hadn't voted in years. Some hadn't voted in the last 3 general elections, but now they were going to vote. They were going to go vote for El-Sayed. And then the polls come out and he's 10 points ahead and you keep hearing it's just going to be a massacre. And of course he's going to win. So if I don't usually vote and it's not kind of on my radar and I get to Tuesday afternoon and realize, oh boy, I've got about an hour to run some errands and vote, but he's going to win anyway. I think those polls keep people from going to the polls.
They did the same thing in the Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump race. 77,000 people in 3 states. We don't know that, they all stayed home. And that was the margin of victory. But when for months, it was a clear decision by the pollsters that she was going to be the next president of the United States. Why would you take the time to go to the poll if it's a done deal, a fait accompli?
What about the theory that they were polling younger people because they thought younger people would show up in bigger numbers, and then they didn't show up? I mean, I think we're still waiting for all of the results, but it looks like young people did not show up in the big numbers that they had predicted. So maybe that's why their polling is
That's
up.
my theory.
Yeah.
If I'm not a voter, I'm 21 years old, and I've never done it, not that into it, but I like this guy. So for the last 2 months, I'm for him. But now, everybody knows he's going to win. He's going to win by a lot. So I don't have to go. I don't even really know where to go vote. And I don't know how to go vote. So I don't want to walk into some place and not know what to do. So I'm not going. I really think that's how people think.
I agree with you, Patty. I think that's a great non-scientific theory of what happened with polling and the actual results.
Yeah, I agree. You can ask people a question and they have to be honest with you in their answers, and many times they just are not.
Yep.
And I like this idea of marrying the numbers, brainiac part of this with the narrative, because I don't think you get the complete story with one or the other. Obviously, there's something going on with the analytics, but also obviously there's something going on with the story of what's happening. And I would like to introduce another variable to the equation was, how can you do accurate polling when there's $70 million of outside expenditures on behalf of one of the candidates? How do you even begin to think about sampling for that or figuring out the impact of that? Because first of all, you have to figure out what you think the impact is going to be. Because I was trying to follow as many like Michigan experts, Detroit experts, especially in their reaction to what was going on the ground. And a lot of people were saying, listen, the black vote in Detroit was being reached to by these mailers showing El-Sayed in pictures with Barack Obama. And the implication was that Barack Obama had weighed in and had backed Haley Stevens, when in fact that didn't happen. And Barack Obama did not really take any effort to clear the situation up. He didn't make a big public statement, nothing like that. So these Michigan politics experts and these people who know Detroit are saying, listen, this is the only information that a lot of these voters got. Obama to this day remains the most popular politician in the United States of America, especially among, according to them, black voters in Michigan. And that stamp of approval, or seeming fake stamp of approval, that got $30-40 million worth of ad spend just on the Barack Obama connection, was enough to sway a lot of voters who may not have even answered the phones or were undersampled. Older black voters might have been undersampled.
Just to clarify, Sam, it was Haley Stevens put pictures of her and Barack Obama on mailers that went out to
The outside,
like Detroit.
the outside.
Yeah. I think you said Abdul El-Sayed's
sorry.
picture. That's okay.
Yeah.
Just to clarify.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I heard, on the street interviews last night with people who said they voted for her because Obama endorsed her. In fact, I even heard a national newscaster come back and correct it, which they don't correct anything. So yeah, I think that had an impact.
Yeah,
it would for me.
I have not seen the cross-referencing of some of the latest surveys that were done, but you'd have to wonder how many qualifying questions they put in before they started asking any substantive questions. So,
could you explain what that is? I mean,
well, you want to know more about these people going into before you ask any questions. So you want to know where are they a resident? Have they registered to vote? Have they voted previously? You might want to know about gender, age. Get as many demographic profile questions out of the way as you can before. Usually the last things you ask is about income levels, because you don't want people to turn off too early in the survey. So you ask all these demographic qualifiers, so then you can put people in all of their silos when you do the cross-referencing. And I have not seen any of the cross-referencing yet today. So,
okay. And there are exit polls also, right? I mean, we can assume that as people were leaving the voting booth, pollsters were trying to figure out what the demographics of actual voters were. And And that's how we know that, right? I mean, because obviously at the election booths, they're not taking those surveys. The state isn't
When
taking those
people
surveys.
when people exit the polls, we have done this. We have done exit sampling here, and when people exit the polls, you ask them, 5 or 6 different questions. That's really about it. Move them along the way and keep moving. You need to get as many people as you can to have a pretty good sample in precincts, representative precincts. And then at the end of the night, when you crunch all those numbers, you should be able to say, and you'll see it at the end of every conversation in media, you'll see them go into exit poll says this, exit poll says that. The only question that, and most of the people will be honest in a lot of those questions, they may not be honest when you ask them, who'd you vote for?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, exit polling has its issues, right? I mean, because a lot of people base a lot of their future actions based on exit polling, and exit polling is just as accurate or inaccurate at times as regular polling, right?
We learned an awful lot when we did exit pollings about the reasons why people went to the polls and the reason they voted for the person they did. There's a lot of information that you can glean from those exit polls if they're done scientifically. So
But I think it's like everything else. People don't trust polls anymore. So why should I talk to you? I don't know this, but I'm guessing along with not answering their phones, they don't want to. When you start approaching them with your clipboard and they're walking out of the polling place, a lot of them are probably like, nope,
Yeah.
is that no people? We're different than we used to be. And we just are. We don't tell people things. People think that, their lives are too invaded now anyway because of technology and, the tracker on your car, that everybody knows where you are, what you're doing.
it's tough to be anonymous these days.
Yeah. And so I think maybe there's some hesitation to stop and talk to a stranger and tell them who I voted for. I don't know that, but I'm guessing that like everything else, all of these technological advancements have changed how people approach even that nice person standing outside the polling place with a clipboard.
Right.
I agree with that. I just think it's harder to get a random sample of people, even when you're doing any type of survey through phone or email or people showing up to your website to take a poll. So I think it's just getting very hard to keep the scientific rigor that you need to make good predictions within that 3.5% margin of error.
And pollsters are also trying to weight the sample, right? They're trying to make it as representative of what they think
Sure.
the electorate's going to look like. So if they think it's going to skew older, they're going to talk to as many older people as they can, or those kind of things. And those are all made at the discretion of the pollster, right? Or
Give me an example. Here in Duluth, we know that probably 51% of the population in Duluth are women. So we want to make sure that when at the end of our polling research, that we have more women than men. We also know that more people of elderly age are going to be more receptive to participating in surveys. And so getting younger people to participate is always a challenge. And so you can weight those samples, by getting a strong enough sample, strong enough response, and then you can make some assumptions through weighting. So there are all kinds of ways to get what you need out of that poll. We've been successful developing methodology here, and in all of our elections that we have forecast, we have been right, and sometimes you just get lucky. So even in I'll bring some news for you. Okay.
Okay.
The recent mayoral election in the city of Duluth. We knew in January what the outcome was going to be. We did 2 samples, one in January and one within about 3 weeks of the election. Both of those samples turned out almost identical.
Okay.
And you were right about Jesse Ventura. Why don't you tell the audience about Jesse Ventura?
We were the only polling organization, maybe in the country, that said Jesse Ventura will be the next governor of Minnesota. And we saw things happening on the stump where he would go visit, or at the state capitol, wherever he appeared. We saw something that we were not seeing with obviously Senator Skip Humphrey at the time,
Or Coleman.
or Coleman, and we just sensed there was an urgency for young people in particular to get to the polls. And so everywhere we sampled, we saw this energy among young people. So the question for us was, are these all going to be new first-time voters? And will they indeed go to the polls? And we kept asking. And it was our conclusion at the end that the other pollsters, going by their standard methodology, were not contacting the new voters, and that's what swept him to the polls.
Well, that, and then there was the break in the solid, reliable labor force on the Iron Range.
Yeah.
They always voted Democrat. Of course, they were going to vote for Skip Humphrey. But when Jesse came up in his Porsche and on his Harley, and stood at the gates in his full leather regalia, and those guys walked away and said, "That guy's just like me."
Just like me.
Then you kind of knew there was a mind shift going on, and it wasn't going to be what it always had been.
And Skip showed up not with a vest on, but at least he had his full suit and tie on at the gate, miners' gate, when they were leaving. And you know what? Here's the message: you're not one of us. And yes, we loved your father, but you are not him. So, yeah.
His father being, for anyone watching that doesn't know, Hubert H. Humphrey, the former vice president and former senator from Minnesota.
Yeah.
And almost president in 1968.
Might have been the president if it hadn't been for those dirty tricksters.
If it hadn't been for the Paris peace talks breaking down, I wonder who was responsible for that. Nixon. But anyways,
I digress. Yeah.
But that is fascinating. That whole thing. By the way, I mean, I'll tell you, to this day, there's a lot of things I like about Jesse Ventura. And if you've seen recent interviews with him, he still connects with people.
He still does. He was my sister's mayor in Brooklyn Center of Minnesota, and she absolutely adored him.
He was in the next town, though.
Brooklyn Park.
No, I thought he was in a town that starts with C.
No, Brooklyn Park, Brooklyn Center.
Oh, okay,
That's where he
maybe.
was, yeah.
I guess I'm not a fan. So.
Yeah. No.
Well, apparently Trump came to meet with Jesse and his team and was trying to figure out how Jesse did it as a candidate, how he won. So even then, Trump was thinking about running for office.
Jesse's no fan of Donald Trump. He's made very clear. So.
No.
But
anyway,
how did you? So you saw this energy. You saw what happened with young people, and you saw what was happening with the steel workers and the miners up on the Iron Range in northern Minnesota. So what did you?
We knew that the Iron Range of Minnesota was going to vote non-democratic farmer labor for the first time, and so we have now seen in recent elections. Since then, we have seen the 8th District, and particularly Minnesota's Iron Range, vote like they haven't since 1918. So,
right.
Yeah.
And so technically then, not to get too mathy, I don't want to get too into the weeds, but when you saw these things with the youth and with the labor, on the mining labor, what did you do? You changed how you sampled, or you how did you factor that into your research and your polling?
Well, you start paying a little bit more attention to these areas you think are going to shift. You do more phoning up on the Iron Range and see if time to time, is it holding? Is that clearly the trend? And not exact numbers, but let's say in an ordinary statewide survey for the governor's race, you might make 50 phone calls to the core Iron Range, maybe you made 75 and maybe you were a little bit more critical about who you talked to. And maybe because older people vote generally, maybe you started looking at that younger demographic and made sure you got enough of them to start gauging if that was going to swing things.
There was an excitement factor in that election that was absolutely an anomaly to every other election that had taken place since. I mean, before and since. It really was that kind of an election.
Mhm.
I don't know that it can ever be repeated because we just haven't. We don't have the luxury of that personality running.
Well, yeah, we have had that for the last 3 consecutive.
Well, at the presidential
elections. We've had a personality running.
Yeah, yes, we have.
It's just not to say it can never happen again. Let's hope it stopped.
But so let's now that we have that story and also the story of yesterday in Michigan, next week we've got a primary here in Minnesota. And while it's not getting the kind of press that it did in Michigan, the Senate race, the Senate primary in the Democratic Party, a lot of the pieces are in the same places on the chessboard. There's a race between a conservative Democrat backed by enormous amounts of money, APAC, crypto, AI, data center supporter, voted with Trump on a lot of the ICE related stuff. So has been out of step with a lot of voters, but has drawn huge amounts of money in outside expenditure versus a more left coded, maybe not as left or certainly not as flashy as Abdul El-Sayed, but and someone who has more been in elected office for longer, so is a little bit more establishment in Peggy Flanagan. But the dynamics are very similar, and the polling is a lot more sparse because it's not as in the spotlight, right? It's not as national, so there's less polling. The polling we do have is biased polling. It's on behalf of this candidate or that candidate for the most part. But it, just like Michigan, is showing double-digit leads for Peggy Flanagan. And I think it is telling that for the most part, Angie Craig has not produced internal polling, because usually if you have internal polling that looks better for you, you'd put it out there just to break the narrative. But two concerns, and then I'll turn it over to you to comment on this. Concern number one is accuracy issues. After what we just saw in Michigan, people are thinking, oh no. And then concern number two is exactly as you said, Peggy, saying, oh, well, the polls show it so in Peggy Flanagan's favor that I don't really need to actually take the time to go vote. So seeing polling numbers like this might create apathy among people who you really have to work hard to get to the polls. So let me turn it over to you. How should we look at this coming election?
Yeah, I don't know that apathy will be a part of this election, only because Minnesota has been so central in a spotlight nationally because of what the president has targeted us. So I think people in Minnesota are excited to go to the polls next Tuesday, the 11th. So we may have an off-year election that might set a voting record, just because you have, again, these two very strong women running. There's a number of primary contests. Probably the one here in Northeast Minnesota in the 8th District is probably the congressional race that will draw the most coverage. It has drawn some considerable coverage. One of the candidates has received a lot of national exposure just because of who he is. And but I will tell you that based on what I have seen in the last couple of days, the betting markets are 90%, 90%, and they are holding steady. That the reality star will not be victorious on Tuesday night.
Okay, just so in case people don't know Northern Minnesota politics as well as you, we're talking about. So there's a reality TV star or someone from reality TV world, Luke Elbranson, who is running in the Democratic primary in Minnesota's 8th congressional district versus the DFL endorsed candidate is Trina Swanson, who is she is a lawyer, but was formerly worked for the State Department and got canned by Elon Musk. Yeah.
25 years of international experience. and let go when Doge and Elon Musk decided to take over control of the administration.
But then the
Right.
question remains, will 8th district voters vote for a woman? I'm sorry. So you can give them a great candidate, but they like that plaid shirt and that guy thing.
T-shirts and hat,
Yeah.
no differently than the sitting congressman did yesterday at Farm Fest. Shows up in an AC/DC T-shirt and a farm hat.
Hey, speaking of that, and this is out of the blue, and you may have no idea, but I saw today that we're talking about the sitting congressman for this area is Pete Stauber. Pete Stauber was at Farm Fest, and he lit into, I think, Tom Emmer's opponent for attacking Tom Emmer, who didn't show up. And I think, did Pete Stauber break news? He said that Tom Emmer was fighting for his life.
It was a little Pete drama.
Yeah. He has had some surgeries on one of his feet or legs.
And his feet. He had bunion surgery.
Which doesn't put you...
My God. What? That's...
Yeah. So,
but the opponent said, he didn't show up. Why doesn't he show up? I'm going to be somebody that will meet with you and I'll show up, and made that a big issue.
Very normal.
I also think when you talk about an office holder who doesn't show up and talk to his constituents, that hits a nerve with Pete Stauber, who doesn't show up and talk to his constituents. So I think he was defending his buddy, but I think he also was feeling like that was an insult to him. So he said, how dare you, or something along those lines. And he said, he's right now, Tom Emmer's fighting for his life. He had bunion surgery.
Oh.
But you know what? Maybe he shouldn't talk about someone else's health like that, right?
Exactly.
Private information. Why is Pete Stauber talking about Tom Emmer's health condition?
Because he lost his temper.
Yeah, but we've done a lot of research on this race and have spoken to a great many people about this race, because we, like everybody else, it's our congressperson. We have an interest. Jen, we have had a long interest in this particular race and what has happened. And the people who have worked with the congressman are the greatest indicators of the personality that we have elected in Washington. Okay, I'll just leave that at that.
Well, they're dramatic and they get angry and you can't question them. I mean, it's
okay. Thank you.
It's kind of the way that a wing of that party has gone, following their leader.
But the people who have worked with him in the past are not complimentary.
Right.
How's that?
Right.
Yeah.
Boy, you're really saying nice word. They're jerks, in other words.
Well, I think
some of it had to do with his intellectual capacity.
Okay.
I will say, I mean, not nationally, no one's interested in unfortunately, our congressional race in CDA, but they are interested in the congressional race in the 1st congressional district in Minnesota.
Yeah.
Have you been doing any polling in that district?
We have not. I've spoken with a number of people in the Twin Cities and South who are more closely following this and just getting their insight into it. So.
And that's Jake Johnson. He's a teacher. This was Tim Walz's district that he flipped from red to blue, and Brad Finstad. And did Finstad show up at the Farm Fest?
Yeah.
Yes, he did.
Okay. But that race, they say, is going to be pretty close. Jake Johnson's got the DCCC support, and he raised a lot of money early on. Was a teacher, and has a lot of big field organization going on. So that'll be the race to watch.
He's gotten
in the general.
Increased exposure in the last couple of days, even national exposure. So
it's kind of strange to me, because I would say that more people dislike Pete Stauber than they dislike Finstad, and that the districts are very similar. So if they're going to go into the 1st district, they should come into the 8th district, and maybe they will next time.
We tend to be a little bit more emotional up here, though, as well.
So let me get things a little less colloquial here. We're talking about the primary vote coming up on Tuesday, and there is another very fascinating congressional primary, I would say, to replace Angie Craig. There's a three-way race with a centrist who was caught betting on his own race on these prediction markets. Then the DFL aligned candidate who is left further to the left, but then there's a more DSA aligned candidate as well. So it's a three-way race pitting, a conservative Democrat with a DSA candidate, and then the DFL endorsed candidate is kind of in that middle lane that Mallory McMurrow, if you recall, was trying to plow that lane herself. It worked very, very, very poorly. I don't know how it's going to turn out.
I was very much surprised at that, Sam. I'll tell you, when I started following her, and then when she put out the release that she was leaving the race, exiting the race, I thought, what happened? You had so much national exposure. I just thought that she was going to be, the next big thing in Michigan. So, but democratic socialism should not, at least at this point, be underestimated.
No.
We've now seen, is this 5 races now?
Incumbents have been knocked. Let's see. Well, Brad Lander was not DSA, but he was campaigning alongside the DSA candidates. He knocked down an incumbent. Daria-Lisa Chevalier knocked down an incumbent. An incumbent got knocked out in a special election last year in New Jersey.
And the Colorado one.
The Colorado one with Melat Kuros.
And then Michigan.
And in Michigan with Donovan McKinney beating Shri Tanadar. And you can kind of say that Haley Stevens had kind of the incumbent lane. I mean, obviously she was a sitting congresswoman and in some ways Angie Craig is trying to do the same thing that Haley Stevens did. And it started this with talking about Angie Craig. I don't know if you want to comment on the specifically on that congressional race to replace Angie Craig.
Well, you're talking about like Matt Little is a former Minnesota state senator. He was endorsed by the DFL. Right. And then there's Kayla Berg.
He's the Mallory McMurrow.
I don't know about that because Kayla Berg said she would appreciate endorsement from Angie Craig. And then Senator Matt Klein is a physician, and he's the one that's the most conservative. And then Kayla Berg, I would say, would be next. And then Matt Little, I would say, is the more progressive of the 3 candidates.
This is a confusing race.
I know, but I know all 3 of them, and that's how I would portray them based on what I've read.
Okay.
And Jen, everything I read about it is that it is just a race and a contest that has not generated the types of enthusiasm or publicity or news coverage as some of the others. So,
but I think it's of the congressional primaries in Minnesota, it's like the most competitive. I think it's far more. I mean, you mentioned the 8th congressional district. I don't think Luke Galbranson has a shot in hell, frankly. But what do I know? But that's the one where there's a genuine race in that.
Yeah, because there's a 3-way race and they all have constituents. I mean, because they're all or former sitting legislators.
Right.
So they have name recognition. They have a core support in that district. And I don't know, has Angie endorsed anyone in that race yet? I don't think so.
I haven't heard that.
That I've seen. It's tough. It is tough for anybody other than these big races. It's tough to generate the sort of, first of all, tough to generate the donations that you need, the finances to run, to separate yourself. And when you are so closely aligned, how do you separate yourself unless you take some offhand position that gets you some coverage? But we have not seen that either. So.
Right. Well, and to kind of swing this back around, we took a nice detour, but I do want to get back to the Senate race. But you mentioned fundraising. Now we've been talking about the huge amounts of outside money that have come in for Angie Craig and then for Haley Stevens in Michigan. But it's not that Abdul El-Sayed and Peggy Flanagan haven't raised money. They've raised large amounts of small donor money in large numbers, and they're using that money more for ground game, more for volunteer coordinating, door knocking, that kind of stuff. I mean, they still have to get on the air to a certain degree. That's unquestionable thing you have to do. You have to get some name recognition stuff up on the air, on streaming, those kind of things. And they are doing that, not nearly to the degree, obviously, because they don't have the same amount of money. But to go back to that race and to go back to the polling in that race between Angie Craig and Peggy Flanagan, it's showing it. I mean, it looks like Peggy Flanagan is very much in the driver's seat, but then it looked that way with Abdul El-Sayed, and then it was nail biting for his supporters yesterday night all the way until like 2, 3 in the morning. So what do we think? Just
Well, I
because you
think
know a lot, you've seen a lot. What do we think about this race between Craig and Flanagan?
Sure. First of all, the KSTP polls traditionally will be skewed more conservatively than any of the others. So some of the national samples, which have been very few, by the way, but most of this has been KSTP sampling. If Peggy Flanagan is 8 to 10 points above Angie Craig in the KSTP sample, then I would think that Peggy Flanagan is going to win on Tuesday night.
Just based on that.
Yeah.
That's pretty. I mean, well,
I think that it's the general disillusion with the established political reality. I think that people are sick of the money. So I don't know that money is going to win. They don't like PACs. They love candidates that say, I'm not taking PAC money.
Some of the early Angie Craig commercials, anti Peggy Flanagan commercials, were like the first couple I saw were like stunningly dark, and I just got so turned off by that. But I don't get a vote. I don't.
You do get a vote.
I do, but it just upsets me that she was deliberately targeted in the way that she was.
It's hard to go negative in Minnesota because people want Minnesota nice in the races, right?
Well,
because these are both Democrats and they want them to get along, and they're going to have to eventually support one another based on who wins. And I do think that I see it trending towards Peggy Flanagan. And I think it's exactly for what you point out. I think people are sick of the money. They love it when candidates don't take corporate PAC money and they're not accountable. They won't have to do what they want the candidates to do. They're not bought, that they're there representing the people, in this case in Minnesota. And that's what people want. That's what they want, their representative to listen to them and to solve their problems, not corporations. And I think Peggy has gotten that message out there very clear. And I think she's also educated Minnesotans about Angie Craig's vote on the Lake and Riley Act. And I think that is really hurting Angie Craig based on what's happened with Operation Metro Surge and ICE agents in Minnesota in particular.
Yeah, and I think that hurts Angie more than any fraud claims against Peggy Flanagan.
Because everyone knows the lieutenant governor is a very ceremonial role.
The only job of a lieutenant governor is the Capitol grounds.
Right.
That's the only job the lieutenant governor of Minnesota has.
She's been having those meetings, a task force on the security at the Capitol, and they're doing, and it's much more secure than when I served at the Capitol. So she's doing her job there, and she can't come out and say, I'm not, about fraud. I'm not at the table. I'm not in those conversations. I'm not in a position of power to resolve the issue.
Yeah, you know what? And Jen, no matter, it doesn't serve her well at all to talk about what Attorney General Ellison might have done or what Governor Bull, because the more you talk about it, the more you're linked to it. So
it's always good to pivot away from that. Which she'll have to get better at when she takes on the Republican if she wins the primary.
Right.
Frankly, shame on Angie Craig for using the Republican line on fraud against her opponent in the Democratic primary. But I also want to point out that demographically, Minnesota is very, very, very different from Michigan. And also, Angie Craig can't do the Obama trick. And even if she could, the black vote in Minnesota is very different from in Michigan, since a significant portion of it is the Somali community, which is one of the most left communities in the state. I mean, they're the main support behind Ilhan Omar, who is, the squad, DSA endorsed, so it's a very different landscape in Minnesota. But again, and people are saying this about Wisconsin too. I don't know how much you're following Wisconsin, but obviously that gubernatorial primary, the polls are overwhelmingly in favor of the DSA. I mean, it's shockingly it's not in the same ballpark of being close. I mean, Francesca Hong has this thing dead to rights according to the polls. But then again, after what happened in Michigan, everybody in both Minnesota and Wisconsin is like, wait a minute. And nobody should take anything for granted, obviously. But how different? I mean, I don't know what your expertise on Wisconsin is, but you certainly speak to Minnesota.
Well, I think Ben Winkler, has
Wickler.
has done a hell of a
He's
job.
gone now.
I know, but he did a hell of a job in
he did.
Wisconsin, and and you see what Ken Martin is under siege in the DNC. Another story, I think, today in the New York Times or Washington Post, one of them. But I think Wisconsin Wisconsin's liberal. Wisconsin has been liberal. I think right now they're probably perceived by some people as being like the new Minnesota. We are not the state we were 20 years ago. And I don't know how we'll get that back or whether we will get it back. So I look at Wisconsin and think, good for you. You're look at the recent the recent judicial elections a year or so ago. I like to see what's happening over there.
Well, and Wisconsin is more liberal than it looks on paper because legislative seats have been so gerrymandered, you can hardly win if you aren't a conservative. But their state races, they elected Tammy Baldwin, and, their governors have generally very, very often been Democrats. In their big cities, they vote for Democrats. When you start breaking out those assembly seats, that's when everything goes red in Madison.
And
that's really not a measure of the state.
Oh, and Wisconsin, in the last election, when they started closing all the precincts in Milwaukee and forcing people to be bussed across, the entire metro area, that's the kind of stuff that really sticks with people and turns them angry and sends them to the polls. So,
I guess we'll find out.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, no, it's like what the pollsters did in Michigan could be completely different. Like if we go back to cards on the table, I despise those betting markets. I think they're the most awful things in the world, but people keep looking at them and bringing them up. Hell, Kalshi pays CNN to have their guy keep bringing up Kalshi all the time. It's just gross. But anyways, they exist. They're out there. People point to them. And what you noticed before last night, 99% of the bets, or whatever Kelshi calls them, to me it's gambling, but 99% of the bets were in favor of Francesca Hong for that primary race in Wisconsin. And as the vote totals were coming in, the number for Francesca Hong was dipping on Kelshi because people think, the way they got the polls wrong in Michigan must also signal that the same thing is going to happen in Wisconsin and Minnesota and elsewhere. But if you go by what happened in Colorado with Melat Kuros, if you go by what happened in New York with those candidates, it seems like polling is like the accuracy of polling is entirely regional dependent. It's entirely dependent on like each specific state. There's no way to know if the inaccuracies in Michigan are at all similar to potential inaccuracies in Minnesota, Wisconsin, or anywhere else. So what you said about the KSTP, which is, one of the big well-funded news stations in Minnesota, doing polls, having a more conservative lean, that makes me feel a little bit safer with Minnesota polling. Should I feel that way?
Never.
Unless you see our name behind it.
But I think the lesson is local polls, they may know their constituents better. And they know who to sample, where to sample, versus a national organization coming into a state that they know not much about. So I would say local polls.
Yeah, because local polling will oversample as needed in certain areas because they sense trending developments within that particular district. Rather than just assign 36 for the 8th district and 17 over here in Western Minnesota. and just, make sure you get your 400 in the bucket. You know, we never did a sample of 400 people. We were always in that 630 to 1,000 range. 630 to will give you like 4%. The 1,000 will give you 3%
Margin of error.
margin of error, and we were always on that high end. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, but to be fair, though, the local pollsters in Michigan, Marquette, Emerson, they were part of that. Now, some people are saying it was pollster herding. What can you explain that? What they were herding? They were all getting it wrong in the same way.
no, I don't understand it, and so I don't have a comment about it, because it's just not something that we have never complied with other pollsters, or we've never used their basis of their samples to try to work within our sample within our methodology. It's just not something that we've ever done. So
Well, listen, I mean, I know that Jen wanted to talk also about a lot of the media stuff that's.
I was gonna say, part of everything that we're seeing, everything that we are seeing and witnessing in our country right now has a lot to do with media consumption and media consolidation. The numbers of messages that you can receive every day are more and more aligning with people who are on Substack, have their own columns, they're independent journalists, they're folks like you who are doing these podcasts, which continue to generate more and more enthusiasm, and as you bring more voices to the front, so people are getting to see something that they're not seeing on these large media groups. And the consolidation that we're witnessing right now is such an incredible danger to everything that we have going on in our electoral politics, but everything that's really going on in so much of society. You can't say enough bad things about what the Ellisons and folks like them, father, son, are doing. To institutions that have for generations been regarded as really the voice of the people in the country. And now they're speaking more loudly for nothing but their corporate overlords.
I mean, I'm sure a lot of Minnesotans are grateful that our Attorney General, Keith Ellison, is joining states to try to stop the merger between Paramount and Warner Brothers, because that could mean that CNN becomes owned by CBS News, and fewer sources, potentially more biased. And I know Ellison put a opinion piece letter in the New York Times today saying that we're all wrong about that fear of the merger. But Patty, I don't know, you were in the radio business. Do we see the same level of consolidation in radio?
Well, I was in the broadcast industry when they deregulated it. And so I actually saw it happen. I saw the changes, and the changes, and people younger than me might not remember this as vividly, but prior to deregulating the broadcast industry, every community had a radio station that somebody in that town owned, even the tiniest communities. A community like Duluth, when I got in the business, every television station except for Channel 3 was owned by a local person. Every radio station was owned by a local person except for the KDALs. Channel 3 and KDAL used to be together. And that made a difference, because first of all, you knew the community. And second of all, if you didn't deliver the way they wanted it, you would hear about it. But there was community pride, and you were interested in the business community, and you wanted to support that. And then they came along and said, no, anybody can own as many stations as they want. So very rapidly, all those little town stations started disappearing. In Duluth, local ownership went away. We were the last ones to go because you couldn't compete. You cannot compete in a market like Duluth with somebody that comes in with a bucket of money to promote and slick things up and hire the best talent. You can't compete with that. So that changed how people view news on a larger scale, but also on a local scale. news outlets became profit centers. They never used to be. That was not how it worked. There was the news and then there was the entertainment. But now you got to make a profit. So we have very few people in our newsrooms locally. Probably very few people. Look what's happened, like the Star Tribune, Pioneer Press. They just don't have the staff anymore. So people are less well informed. You can't know because there's not time to know.
I'll just say this. The Minnesota Star Tribune is still a pretty damn good newspaper, despite the ownership issues that some people like to bring forward. A quick story. When Patty was buying radio stations and I was in television, I got to Duluth in the early 1970s. My first television station had 13 dayside reporters and 10 camera people. Today, 2 people work dayside. Everybody else is an anchor man. They have a newscast going on all day long. What they don't have is anybody on the streets gathering news. My only job as a reporter was to sit in City Hall all day long. I read every single piece of paper that went in and out of City Hall twice a day. They couldn't tell you right now the reporters wouldn't know where to find that. I don't know that sometimes they ever go up to the 4th floor to the mayor's office. I sat with the mayor of Duluth every single day, asking him questions about whatever topic was relevant that particular day, because we're searching for news. But we had beat reporters. There was an education reporter. There was a county reporter. There was an environmental reporter. We had all of these things that you make news. Somebody was covering that every day. The battle that we had in filling a 13-minute news window in a half hour was how many stories can you get in there? So it became a case of you have to have 1 minute and 30 seconds to tell that story or you weren't going to get on the air. But you filled up 13 minutes of news. Now they begin almost every newscast with a weather cast. And how many weather segments will they do during a half-hour newscast? And they might have 3 legitimate news stories in an average day. Why would you watch local television news?
Don't say that.
What?
Well,
Okay.
I will say, people they used to watch the same channels, right? The CBS,
Well, that's
ABC,
the other thing that
NBC.
happened.
And
Yes.
so now you have actually more sources because you have a lot of independent sources. And I don't know, the Duluth Monitor or Howie Hands. And now some people, independent journalists, are trying to cover more local things.
Sure.
But it's not consistent, and it's volunteer basically. People are doing it as volunteers. They're not paid to do that.
Yep. And so who do you trust? Where do you go? Because there are so many sources for news. It changes everything.
And even calling it news is, I don't know if the Fox channel is actually putting out news. It's entertainment and propaganda. And so people don't know, you're right, if they can trust what they're hearing. And young people are consuming their news from social media. And
I will tell you, Jen, I will tell you that in an average day, I get more news through private messages than you'll ever see on the news that night.
Yeah. It's just the whole thing has changed. But talk to people, for instance, you brought up Fox News. Talk to people that consistently watch Fox News, and that's where they get their news. They have an entirely different view of the world. And that's part of our problem, because we're all going to the polls, but we're not voting for the same thing because we don't live in the same vision. And I think that's dangerous and damaging.
I think so. And I think that also the FCC, they're going to also loosen their rules on how many TV stations you can own. So we're going to see more consolidation.
6 corporations own over 80% of the broadcast media in this country.
Here's the danger. Sinclair Broadcasting has a thing called must carry. And they have 1,700 stations, I think, something on that order across the country. And every day they send out by their satellite to all of these affiliate stations a segment that you absolutely must carry. And it's a conservative message. That's not news. That's propaganda.
It's interesting kind of looking at it from when you're not in that Fox News bubble and you look at it, which none of us are obviously, but you look at it from the outside. It's Jen mentioned earlier, there used to be the big 3 and everybody got their news from the same place. It's like when we look at Fox, it's kind of like if you looked on the outside looking in back then, it would look similar. Everybody was getting their information from the same sources and had the same marching orders and what has been called manufactured consent. So when they wanted to go to war with Vietnam, those three sources kind of like lined up behind it and manufactured consent for the war in Vietnam. So it's not like things were better per se.
No,
It just
no.
created more homogeneity in information and what people were doing. I celebrate the explosion of independent media, but it's also scary and alarming that so much of it that call themselves independent media are actually quite bought and paid for themselves as well. I mean, the Larry Ellisons of the world have also been buying up the rights to essentially own the message on a lot of these independent sources as well. So they're corporate too.
Yes. Oh,
Well,
yeah.
I mean, I used to read the Free Press when
Oh.
Barry White was the editor.
Ugh.
Yeah, I know. Trust me, I know, Sam. But I like to expose myself to all of those messages to see what other people are thinking, other than just me. And
Fair.
I did unsubscribe the other day because some of the stuff that was coming across was just too much even for me. So I had to unsubscribe from the Free Press. So
You have a hell of a stomach, Duke. My goodness. Free press.
I know
Right.
it just became so awful.
Right. So in case anyone watching doesn't know, the Free Press was started and run by a former New York Times columnist named Barry Weiss, who is kind of like become the it girl for corporate sponsorship and APAC and defense of
That is
Israel. And she was
CBS and 60
Yeah,
Minutes. Yeah.
handpicked by Larry and David Ellison to run CBS News. And so when you see all these firings at 60 Minutes and all that stuff, that's Barry Weiss. And if he buys CNN, it's expected that Barry Weiss, who really has no, aside from like,
No news background. No.
yeah,
You know,
she has no credible like background. Like she doesn't know she's bad at everything she does. She's just very, very good at sucking up to the right people.
It
And-
you know it really is. It really has become an increased case of citizen journalism. We have a number of people in Duluth who were former mainstream journalists who now run very active social media pages and podcasts, just like you're doing here. There is so much news and information being shared across these platforms every single day that the mainstream media can never get to.
Right.
And on my social media, I subscribe to the Times, the Post, the Wall Street Journal, all of the major publications. I feed as much of that on my page as I can because I pay for it, and not everybody does. And so I want to make sure that I'm exposing at least my followers to as much news in one day as they can possibly get from a variety of sources. And many of them are mainstream, but a lot of them are alternative press.
Yeah, I think the message I think I would like to leave our audience with is support your local paper, support papers so they can stay around. We all have, the Minnesota Star Tribune exist, and there's other independent journalists. Like I also read the Minnesota Reformer. They also take donations, so support them. It's free online, and they cover everything in Minnesota. We need to support independent journalism. It is so vital to our democracy and the future of our country. And I hope people will go out and do that. But I really appreciate
make
your
sure
time.
it's independent. Make
sure it's independent. Yeah. Follow the money. But I really appreciate Duke and Patty joining us today as guests and all you do for our community, and Duke for keeping everybody informed. I think a lot of people are reading your posts and watching your interviews, Duke.
Well, thank you so much, Jen. I mean, I invite people to come on and talk with me. And if you've seen any of them, it's never about things that I think. It's about the people who I'm interviewing and what they think and what proposals they have to make our lives better or at least more meaningful. If we're ever going to take back any power in this country, it has to be a unifying voice and messages coming from the average American who needs to be reinvigorated and reengaged in our culture and our electoral process. And it's programs like this and programs like other people are doing. There are a number of in Minnesota in particular, there are a number of wonderful alternative press options for citizens to, read and become more engaged in their community. We can scream all day long about what we see happening in this country, but only through organization and making sure that everybody is informed. Only through that can we really begin the process of going to the polls and before we get there, putting candidates forward who will speak for us.
Right. Well, again, yeah, thank you both. This has
Thank
been
you.
a very fun conversation. I think we got a lot out of it. I know I did. So very
thank
much
you very much.
appreciated.
Let's make sure we follow up in the future if we can. There's a lot of news to be made between now and November, if we ever have a midterm election. Keep in mind, this man in the Oval Office behind the Resolute desk will do everything within his power to make sure that vote in November never gets counted.
Well, in Minnesota, it starts with Tuesday.
That's
So
right.
make sure you participate in the primaries and vote early if you haven't voted early already. And I would say vote often, but that's not how things
Vote
work.
once. Vote once.
That used to be funny.
It used to be funny. And watch my interview with Luke Goldbranson.
Yes.
Well,
And your town hall. In your town hall.
in your town hall.
He's finally committed to do an interview with me. And yes,
Okay, well-
my town hall with Trina Swanson.
Yes.
Yeah.
We'll
so
share that out.
Where can
Wednesday.
viewers find you, Duke?
Find me at on Facebook mostly, or my Substack.
Find Duke Skorich on Facebook or Substack. Patty, do you have anything additional to plug?
Under
No.
Dushan, by the way.
Yeah.
Oh,
Because Facebook Meta decided a couple months back that I was too controversial, and they eliminated all of my accounts, including my business account and the radio station account where I had archived hundreds of shows.
Wow.
all right. I have a book recommendation for you then.
Okay,
So-
I gotta sign off. Everybody.
Thank you, Jen.
Thank you.
Enshittification by Cory Doctorow. Everybody should read that book. Enshittification by Cory Doctorow.
Okay.
I'll look for it. Thanks.
Send me the link, okay?
Well, it's a book. can't read it.
I will.
I'll put it. I'm gonna and for viewer, I'm gonna put it in the show description on this one.
Oh, wonderful.
Okay.
All right.
highly
Thanks, Matt.
recommended. But thank you so much. Jen had a heart out, but we'll end it now. Appreciate it, and
Thanks.
we'll talk to you again soon.